Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Monday's edition of Thanksgiving week, and we're broadcasting from our beautiful studios here in Irvine, California. Happy to have you with us today. And folks, over the course of the weekend, it looks like we're getting closer to finally getting the numbers of what Congress is really going to look like next year. Democrat Adam Frisch conceded to Lauren Boebert of Colorado over the weekend, giving Republicans now a 219-213 advantage in the House. There are 3 seats in California that are still undecided. You might be saying, how could they possibly still be undecided? Well, it's because California has a law that says if your mail-in ballot is postmarked by election day, then it counts. So if it comes in, those ballots came in last week, they're going to finish counting them. So Republicans lead in 2 of those 3. So if Republicans end up taking 2 of the 3 seats, we'll end up with a 221 Republican, 214 Democrat House of Representatives. And that's actually one more than Pelosi had. Pelosi had a 220 to 215 House after Republicans actually picked up 14 seats in the 2020 election. So while the news wasn't great for Republicans on Election Day, 2 weeks ago, think about this. Tomorrow it'll be 2 weeks since we had the election. And we still have 4 counting Boebert's seat. We hadn't officially been called yet, despite the fact the guys conceded. And it's a state mandatory recount. When it's that close, I mean, she won by 500 and some odd votes. State law requires an automatic recount. They're not expecting ballots to change. So now, tomorrow will be 2 weeks since election. We still have 3 districts in California that have not yet been called. You think that's bad, folks? What did we tell you about Alaska? All right. Lisa Murkowski, existing senator, has taken the lead in the 2 states in this country, Alaska and Maine, have this crazy thing called ranked choice voting. It's a scheme is what it is, but she's likely headed towards a win. And I'm not going to get into a ranked choice voting scenario explained, but basically you rank your candidates 1 through 4. And if nobody gets 50%, then the 4th place candidate's votes are reallocated, and then the 3rd place candidate's votes are reallocated. Anyhow, that system was designed by Murkowski allies in the Alaska State House and Senate, and it looks like it's going to pay off for her. She appears headed towards defeating a conservative, Kelly Shrivak, I think is how her name is pronounced, and so the seat will retain Republican, but you're not going to have a conservative Republican instead of having a moderate Republican, as it appears. But that race isn't going to be decided. I think that's another week or 2 away also. So here we are. Tomorrow's 2 weeks after election. Again, there's been no material impropriety other than some of the dumb stuff that happened in Maricopa County where 7% of the votes had to be refigured because they ran out of ink. But outside of that, it's just taken a while to count some of these votes. So as it stands right now, it looks like Republicans will have 221 seats, Democrats 214 seats. In the Senate, it's crystal clear. Democrats have 50, Republicans have 49. The runoff election is December the 6th in Georgia. Raphael Warnock, the incumbent, versus Herschel Walker, the challenger. And we'll see which base comes out to vote. And will any of the independents come out to vote? It's to be determined. So that race, Warnock won the original election by a point. But to give you a little history lesson here, in 2020, both Republicans won on election night. The problem was neither one of them got 50%. And when the runoff election happened, John Ossoff won his race and Raphael Warnock won his race. So the 2 Democrats won the runoffs. So we'll see what happens this time, whereas Warnock won the initial, and we'll see if Herschel Walker can catch him in the runoff. If Walker does win, That means we would have a 50-50 Senate, similarly what we had going into the 2022 election, and Vice President Harris would be able to cast the tie-breaking vote. Now, let me shift back to the House. We're all aware there are certain conservatives, and we've sort of lambasted them, who say they're not going to support Kevin McCarthy. Maybe they're jockeying for political positions, for changing in rules. McCarthy's still got some deals he's going to have to cut to get those people over. But at the end of the day, it appears McCarthy will be the Speaker. He has vowed to remove the lying Eric Swalwell, the horrible liar Adam Schiff, and the congenital liar, however you want to call it, consistent liar Ilhan Omar from the House of Representatives committees. Now, Omar has made blatant anti-Semitic remarks. She has no business being on any committee. Adam Schiff is a complete liar and a fraud. Lied about everything, particularly from the Russia fake collusion case, the hoax, and Swalwell's right in there too. None of those three, and take my word for it, Pelosi, when she did the January 6th committee, 7 Democrats, 2 Republicans. It's payback time, folks. And I could not think of a better trio that shouldn't be on any key House committees than those 3. So, it does, again, McCarthy's going to have to continue to gather the votes. Our expectation is he'll get there. Steve Scalise is going to be the number 2. So, let's see if this thing comes together. Now, President Biden, he turned 80 this past weekend, and again, just like the clock, hitting midnight or hitting noon twice a day, people right on cue are saying, should Biden run for re-election? He'd be 82 years old, and if he served out his complete second term, if he were to be elected, he'd be 86 years old. Now, a large chunk of the electorate in past polls has said they do not want Biden to run again. But think about this. If you're Biden, I'm just taking from his perspective, and despite the fact that he was polling at about 40 to 42% approval rating, 70% of the country said we're going in the wrong direction. None of those bad numbers ever rubbed it really off on him based upon what happened this election. No incumbent Democrat lost. And while Republicans are going to pick up about 12 seats, it looks like, 10, 11, 12 seats, to take control of the House based on what we talked about earlier, it wasn't near the wave a lot of people had anticipated. Now, some people forget about the fact Republicans flipped 14 seats when Biden was elected president. That's not normal. So figure 14 in the 2020 election, about 11 or 12 in the 2022 election, so you got 24, 25 seats over a period of 2 elections. That's how Republicans took back the House. That's a big deal, folks, because now Republicans will control all the committees. They have subpoena power. Anybody talked to Hunter Biden lately? Okay, and we'll get into that later in the show. But, again, not as performed as well as expected. So not only are Democrats asking this question, which they should be, Biden supposedly is going to make his announcement sometime in January. We'll see if he has any challengers. Will a challenger to an 80-year-old president with a 40 to 42% approval rating emerge? We don't know. But a lot of Democrats are coming out voicing support for the president. We'll see how long that support stays. Now, Trump was welcomed back. Speaking of Trump, got to get him in the conversation. Speaking of the election, Trump was welcomed back on Twitter by Elon Musk, but according to Trump, he's saying he's not going to use Twitter. We'll see how long. See how long that holds up. Pompeo came out basically and said the GOP is tired of losing, sort of a direct swipe at Trump's contribution toward the losses, in the midterm elections. Now, as everybody aware, Trump has made his announcement for president. Again, our preference is somebody else, and we've made that crystal clear. I don't believe President Trump is electable. I've said that numerous times. voted for him twice, contributed towards his campaign, thought he was a good president. The fact of the matter is, he's negative 30% with independents. You do not win elections being negative 30 with independents. And of those key states that we talked about, if Trump is on the top of the ticket, and we're talking Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and throw North Carolina in there, those 7 states will decide the next president. Maybe Virginia. Possibly if Glenn Youngkin gets in the race because he flipped Virginia from blue to red in the governor's race. So far, the only senator to endorse President Trump was Tommy Tuberville from Alabama. Alabama's Trump country, folks. I mean, his approval rating in the state of Alabama is like 70%. So the question is, what other Republican candidates will get in? I think sometime after the holidays. I think Trump's going to occupy the space up through Christmas. But when we flip the script into the new year, turn the calendar, if you will, and we get into January, it is not going to surprise me in the least to see Mike Pence get in the race, Nikki Haley get in the race, Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, CIA Director, get in the race. Those are 3 right there. I haven't even mentioned Ron DeSantis yet. And there's possibly others. So we'll see how it plays itself out. But right now, Trump has only received the endorsement of 1 senator, and some of the big money people who supported him last time, they're sitting it out this time. So, do we know who our nominee is going to be? Nope. Do we know who the Democratic nominee is going to be? Nope. Good. We just finished one election. Let's take some time when the new Congress gets in to govern, and then we'll see how the chips are played. My guess, sitting here today, 2 weeks out after the midterms, is that Biden will run again on the Democratic side. He'll go unchallenged, and I think someone other than Trump will emerge from our side. Now, like it or not, okay, folks, for us to win these elections, Republicans have to vow to embrace early voting and some type of ballot harvesting to compete. As we've said on a couple shows post-election, we cannot be here 70% down in early voting prior to election. That's not going to win. Now, in Florida, Republicans figured out how to early vote. There were more Republicans that early voted in Florida than there were Democrats. California's figured it out. Republicans outperformed very well in the state of California. Yeah, they didn't win any statewide races, but they did elect some Republicans to Congress, and in some of the cities, which are deep blue Democrat, Republicans increased their voters. And on a statewide basis, some of the losses weren't as big as we traditionally would have thought. So Republicans in California have learned a lesson. Hey, I don't like these election laws, but until the laws are changed, we can't be telling our voters to show up on election day. Play by the rules. And if we have to ballot harvest to compete, we have to do it to compete. I'm not in favor of it, but you know what? It's a zero-sum game in politics. Ask yourself this question. Do you ever remember anyone saying, well, man, you ran a really good campaign? The only person in this campaign that got accolades for losing, and rightfully so, was Lee Zeldin in New York, who ran a phenomenal campaign and came within 5 points. No, actually, it was a little bit more than that, but it wasn't too much more, of Kathy Hochul, the sitting Democratic governor of New York. Lee Zeldin's coattails helped pull across 4 Republican congressmen. They had to put a plaque up in his name, in the House of Representatives, because, folks, had Lee Zeldin not performed as well in New York, we would not be sitting here in control of the House of Representatives. But think ahead. In a couple months, once Congress takes shape, is anyone going to really remember how much someone won by? No, they're just going to say, hey, the Republican won or they lost. Lauren Boebert, she's going to win her race by 500 votes. When she's up there on the House floor, is someone going to say, it doesn't really count what she says. She only won by 500? No. A win is a win. And committee chairmen are going to be Republicans because Republicans now control the majority. Now, we did make some inroads. Okay, we talked about some of the inroads of the Hispanic voters. You know, here's an interesting thing that came out also, folks. A majority of Hispanic voters want tougher border enforcement. You know, for the life of me, I cannot figure this out. I mean, I think I know the answer and I'll share it with you. But common sense, why wouldn't you want your border secure? The only plausible explanation I can come up with is they want to flood the zone with illegal immigrants to try to force Republicans to vote on some immigration law. That's not going to happen. Chuck Schumer and Dick Durbin even floated the idea of doing some type of limited amnesty for like farm workers. The GOP is in no mood, any senator, of supporting anything like that. Yeah, the House, currently construed with Democratic majority, can pass bills to allow undocumented, to have citizenship and increase that. Republicans aren't going to touch that. It would require a 60-vote filibuster-proof Senate. There's not one Republican that would support that. So while majority of Hispanic voters want tougher border enforcement, Democrats continue with this lax enforcement down at the border. And again, 200,000 a month continue to stream across. Now, let's get to some economic news here. You know, the president and his party, although they lost the House, they did pick up more seats than anticipated, and they lost no seats in the Senate. So clearly, the Democratic Party was not punished by the economic conditions we're in right now. But here's a fact, folks, that may cause concern heading into the next election. 60% right now of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And folks, with inflation still running rampant, prices are still 7.5% to 8% increase. That's a problem. The Biden administration didn't get penalized in this election. And we've dissected it 6 ways to Sunday about why. But the fact is, if more and more Americans continuing to live paycheck to paycheck, they're going to have to do something to bring down this spending and get this inflation under control. The Fed is doing a good job with interest rates. I don't want to hear it. When I know the Fed's doing a good job is when people like Elizabeth Warren and Dick Durbin complain about interest rates going up too fast. Folks, there's no easy choices here. The Fed has limited tools in its arsenal, but the tools are very effective. So with 60% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, the inflation has got to get under control. Now, here's part of the problem, okay? Forecast among employers is that workers are expecting to receive a 4.6% pay increase in 2023. And you're saying, well, Mark, that sounds pretty good. Well, if inflation were averaging less than 5%, you would keep up with inflation. And by the next year, maybe it will be below 5%, but right now it's not. Right now it's running, call it 7.5%. So if you get a 4.6% increase and inflation's running 7.5%, you're upside down 3 points. And when 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, that's a problem, folks. Another thing that's not helping us out are these soaring diesel prices. My God. Folks, we talk about the price of gasoline to fill up your car. Diesel is $1.61 a gallon higher than gasoline. Well, diesel is used in trucks to transport food all across the country. If diesel prices stay high or are going higher, that's going to cause food prices to go higher. And for those of you that live in the Northeast, depending on heating oil, you can't say we didn't warn you. Joe Visconti was on this show talking weekly about what's going to happen to heating oil cost. So keep that in mind. Again, these economic problems are not going to change overnight because, we still have an administration that Democrat, Senate Democrat, House Democrat, that's not going to change until January. Now, a lot of you have asked me, Mark, what about this student loan thing here? Well, the Biden administration has now asked the Supreme Court to intervene to support their illegal policy of resolving the student debt problem by forgiving student debt $10,000 to $20,000. Folks, Congress has the purse strings. It's crystal clear in the Constitution. This was an illegal scheme put out a couple months before the election to cancel student debt without any authorization from Congress in an effort to buy votes. What did the administration care? If they lost, and they've stopped taking applications, by the way, if they lost that court case, they can always say, well, we tried, it was the Republicans that blocked us. But the fact is, they had Democrats control Congress, Democrats controlled the Senate. They could have advanced this bill. Why did they not advance it? They wanted to keep the issue. They weren't interested in solving the problem. Same thing with the border. Same thing with illegal immigration. They want the issue. They don't want the result. But in this case, we don't know what the Supreme Court's going to handle this, but 2 federal judges have said no. And the judges are right. So now you got all the administration liberals are saying, well, we may consider just freezing payments. Again, folks, if you forgive debt, that's debt people don't have to pay back. They're going to spend the money on other items. And surveys have already shown what they're going to spend it on. Clothing, cars, booze, partying. Yeah, that's a really good combination. No, you borrow money from the federal government or private groups to go to school, pay it back. That's the American way. But that's not the Democratic Party's way. Oh, no, not them. Now, speaking of Democrats, this organization, FTX, which was a crypto exchange of the now disgraced Sam Bankman-Fried down in the Bahamas, word's out now that FTX owes creditors $8 billion. That's a whopping number. And all those young voters who trusted this guy Bankman-Fried with their, quote, crypto dollars, they're screwed. They're going to lose their investment. Problem for Democrats is this guy Bankman-Fried contributed millions to the Democratic Party. Heck, he was seen in pictures with Maxine Waters nonetheless. We don't know the exact number of how much Bankman-Fried doled out among the Democrats, but it's a significant number in the tens of millions of dollars. Democrats are now under pressure to return that money. Once a trustee gets in there, folks, this is how it works in bankruptcy court. A trustee has the power to, quote, claw back money that was illegally paid to certain creditors for the benefit of all the creditors. I'm not even getting into the criminal charges yet. That's going to be determined down the road. But a restructuring guy, the same guy that was brought in to restructure Enron and the debacle that was, is now handling the FTX situation. He's already made statements saying this is among the worst he's ever seen, by far, not even close. Worse than Enron. So will the Democrats have to give back that money to what we'll call, the bankruptcy estate so that it can be properly distributed, maybe to customers whose money was commingled with other assets? We'll see. But FTX has over 1 million creditors. 1 million creditors. That exchange had a lot of people that trusted them with their money in this now obvious Ponzi scheme. And I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. The Bahamas is cracking down. Federal regulators are there. The Justice Department, members of Congress, on both parties, by the way. So this debacle is going to be a painful lesson for those who gave money to FTX. The creditors are going to be wiped out. We'll see what happens with customers that put their money into FTX. And disappointingly, folks, there was, another mass shooting over the weekend. This happened at a bar in Colorado. 5 people were killed. It turns out that the person charged has been charged with murder and a hate crime. Apparently it was an LGBTQ bar. Let me tell you something. It doesn't matter what it was. There's no excuse for a mass killing like that. And hopefully, if he was charged with a hate crime, he'll be convicted and sentenced accordingly. That's just a terrible story. We hate reporting it, but it did happen over the weekend. And breaking earlier today, crazy story. A car drives into an Apple store in Massachusetts, kills one, multiple people injured. They don't know if it was intentional or an accident. And here in Southern California, we talked a little bit about it last week. We had a guy drive his car into a group of police recruits. No one died yet, but one's gravely ill. Multiple people in critical condition. Now the driver has claimed it was an accident. He didn't try to kill people. We'll see how that thing plays out. He's been charged as though it were intentional with attempted murder. And there's some severely injured cadets who were trying to join the police department out for a run in Los Angeles, and it was mayhem, folks. So, you had your typical Chicago over the weekend, 22 people shot. I mean, folks, the crime in these blue cities, again, it didn't seem to affect the Democrats, who continue to win overwhelmingly in blue cities, particularly the deep blue ones. So, maybe the old saying, until it gets so much worse, it won't get better. But this situation with Democrats and crime shows no signs of abatement. Now, I'm not blaming Democrats. Let me be clear. I'm not blaming Democrats for the mass shooting. That's not. I don't take that inference at all. That's not a political issue. That was a crime issue. But you just continue to see week after week these crime statistics coming out of these blue cities, and it's horrible to see. And anytime we see these mass killings, it's just horrific for the families, the friends. It's just a horrible situation. So Democrats are not paying political prices for that, but we'll see. As things continue to move along, we will see. So we'll keep an eye on these last three races in Congress. We'll certainly do everything we can to support Herschel Walker in Georgia. That's really important, folks. Having 50-50 Senate's a big deal. It may not be as good as winning it, but it's less bad than having a 51-49 deficit. Plus, it's a 6-year seat. If Walker can win it, that's another one we don't have to pick up in another state. So we'll keep our eyes on that. In the meantime, it's Thanksgiving week. Man, there was some good football over the weekend. Blowout games, crazy stuff, tight games in college. But for all you football aficionados, this is your time of year. Thanksgiving coming up. We'll be back tomorrow and Wednesday. Thanks for viewing and listening today, folks. We'll cut through the propaganda. Jeffrey's going to show up early tomorrow. See you on Tuesday. Have a good evening.